Hello, and welcome to another session of Stelmo's Rants and Raves. I'm Stelmo, so let's just jump into this. We're going to go over some more headlines that they have at the libertydaily.com. And let's start off with this one, which is really interesting. It reads, plurality of Americans say all their money is going towards living expenses amid affordability crisis. So let me talk about the problem here. Because the problem is our government routinely publishes bogus information. And we've seen this most significantly with the numbers put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You know, every month they go back and they're revising their numbers, and by the time the revisions are done, the initial number is nothing more than some, let's say, dream that somebody has, but it's a far cry from reality. And I believe, I know, that another number that's never been accurate is the inflation number. Inflation has been much higher than our government has ever said it is. And it's created this problem now that, and this, who do I blame? Well, primarily it's Biden, because the inflation during the Biden term, which, and let me say, a small percentage of that was a residual from Trump's first term. But we had this inflation, and I got to be careful here. I'm tempted again to say inflation. Inflation is, by definition, an increase in the money supply. The fact that prices go up is a result of inflation, and it's not the actual inflation. And again, that's something our government did years ago. If they put out false information time and time again, people are going to live with that false information. And I think most people today believe that prices going up is inflation, whereas it really is a result of inflation, an increase in the money supply. The money supply keeps getting increased. There are less and less lenders for the U.S. government because the amount of money they're borrowing is so significant. And let's review what happened here, because going back to the Biden years and Janet Yellen, there's a really devious dipstick if ever there was one. But this woman, she realized at some point in time, and I don't know the exact time that this started, but the interest rate on the long-term debt was rising to the point where it could become problematic for the country. So they decided to go with short-term debt. And this was, initially there were plenty of buyers of the short-term debt. And there was less of a risk posed to the lenders because, if inflation did jump up, they could get their money out and do other things with it to try to protect themselves from inflation. Because the best way to protect yourself from inflation is to acquire material goods. In some cases, you have a lot of people, they promote buying precious metals, and that is an option. But anything that you have that's not cash, that should also, the price of that should rise as they continue to increase the money supply. So Janet Yellen just pumped more and more into the short-term debt issuance as opposed to long-term debt issuance. And then here we now have Trump's third term actually, but we all know the story there. In this term, Besant has been forced to continue doing what Yellen started, and that is to issue short-term debt because the buyers of long-term debt are requiring a much higher interest rate than is beneficial, I'll say, for our country. This interest is ultimately, I think, what's going to cause our downfall. I was looking today, and earlier, the 10-year was up 10.2 basis points, and it's a steady rise. And this is a result of the most recent inflation numbers that the government put out. And you can bet that the actual inflation is far worse than they're claiming. Nonetheless, they're claiming it's gone up. And that, of course, causes the interest rates to all start to rise. And I suggest that's going to continue. I don't know how we work our way out of this. I don't think we do. I think what's going to happen here over the next few months, perhaps a year or two, but I don't think too much longer, we're in a doom loop. You know, with our debt, we're having to borrow not just money to meet our current budget, but we're having to borrow money to pay the interest from previous lending. You know, it's last I heard we were at $1.5 trillion a year in interest, and it's going to keep going up. It's going to keep going up and keep going up, and it's going to get harder and harder to meet. And I don't know how this plays out. I know they're going to probably try some manipulation. But I always think that there's always the law of unintended consequences. And they're dealing with such a huge, complex system. I don't think they're ever going to be able to figure out a way to make a meaningful change without really causing other major problems. And I just don't know how this gets fixed. That's the sad part about it. You know, I don't want to be such a pessimist, but where's the optimism? You know, I was optimistic when Trump was elected here to his third term, but I'm going to say this time around, I am not as, I don't find Trump's policies as favorable as I did in his first term. And also in this third term, he has been, he's not been as honest with everyone as he was in his first term. And, I mean, it is a problem, but on the other hand, you know, you can't support the Democrats because they've told us they're going to, you know, add new states, add Democratic senators. They're going to pack the Supreme Court. They're going to do away with the filibuster. They are going to collapse this country and try to put in its place a socialist utopia. And what we will end up with is a socialist nightmare, because that's always how it works out. No utopia, all nightmare. And, you know, I don't see, you know, if you go back, you know, certainly a decade and perhaps, I don't know, 2 decades, you go way back to find where you had a grassroots movement, the Tea Party, and they were always out at major intersections where every and anybody could join them. People had their own signs. They didn't have any of these professional signs that the Democrats always seemed to have ready for their protest. But this was a grassroots movement. It terrified the politicians of both parties. And but since that time, people tried to reform. I hate to say reform, but people tried. They were trying to change the group to include positions and things that it never was intended for. And the next thing you know, it just more or less disappeared from the landscape. And since that time, nobody's been objecting that I'm aware of. There's been no major protest or anything about our debt, and it's this debt that's ultimately going to cause all kind of serious problems I don't think that most people in our government are aware of. But it is what it is. And so here's the next headline. Ken Paxton isn't fooling around with counties that aren't cooperating with ICE. And that's a video. You know, this reminds me of a problem I have with Donald Trump. And I have a lot of problems, like I said, with him, this administration. This is just but one of them. You know, certainly it was a month ago, and maybe even 2 months ago, Donald Trump announced that he would shortly be making a nomination, or excuse me, an endorsement for the primary, Republican primary for Senate in the Senate seat in Texas. And you have Rhino John Cornyn running for re-election, and you also have Ken Paxton, the Attorney General currently of Texas, running for Senate. And although I have no proof, I suggest Donald Trump was leaning towards endorsing John Cornyn. And I think he found such pushback from people in his administration that he's decided he hasn't issued an endorsement yet. And I find this problematic. There should be no doubt. You want to get rid of the Rhino, and you want Ken Paxton has a long history of doing the right thing. And like here, he's supporting ICE, and he may be supporting ICE to a further degree than the federal government is right now, because it seems to me that the federal government has given up on getting rid of illegal immigrants. They're here in Florida. They're closing the Florida Alcatraz. They called it building they had that was housing the illegals, which is sad. Why? I don't know. I can speculate. But I don't know for sure. And I think, again, that this is a mistake. But I just don't understand why Donald Trump hasn't come out and endorsed Ken Paxton. To me, it's a simple pick. Look, I didn't think it was prudent for Donald Trump to support the Senate majority doing as much as he has. And look, all you have to do is look at the Save America Act, and it's not going nowhere. And that's all on the Senate Majority Leader. If he wanted to use his power, he could get that bill passed. He can get those errant Republicans right in line and get it passed. But I believe he doesn't support it. I think he wants, he's a rhino. He's always been a rhino. And hopefully, at some point in time, he gets primaried out. But as long as the voters keep putting in these rhinos who, like their Democrat counterparts, love to spend money, they've never found a sum of money that they're not willing to spend, including trillions and trillions that we don't have. And that's, of course, going to come back and bite us. But it is what it is. Anyway, so we got one over a few more headlines, and I appreciate everybody's who are viewing this. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them down below, or any comments. I'd be interested to hear your take on some of these matters. Perhaps there are people who are more optimistic out there who can share their reason for optimism. That would be appreciated. And with that, wish you all a safe day. Stay safe. It's a crazy world out there, and it gets crazier by the day. Thank you. Goodbye.